This Voice of San Diego podcast is brought to you by Manilatos Nelson Murphy Advertising and Public Relations. M&M is run by Tony Manilatos, Bob Nelson, and Kelly Murphy Lamkin, who bring decades of advertising and public relations experience to businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, and campaigns. M&M bridges the gap between clients and the people whose influence matters most. M&M is a full-service agency that helps clients develop their strategy and launch cost-effective tactics. The firm specializes in public affairs and advertising with an emphasis on media relations, crisis communications, community outreach, coalition building, broadcast, print, direct mail, and digital advertising. Our reporters at Voice of San Diego have definitely heard from Tony and Bob over the years. Tony, Bob, and Kelly are supporters of Voice of San Diego, and you can learn more about their firm at mnmadpr.com. That's mnmadpr.com. Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Cocoa. This is the Voice of San Diego on the radio and on podcasts. My name is Scott Lewis, and I'm here with my friend, Andrew Keatts.
What's up, my man?
What's up, brother?
Not a lot.
So, the president.
Yeah.
President Trump.
Our president.
Our president is getting a lot of his nominees in the Senate finally approved. Mm-hmm. And you know that one of them, of course, one of the most important of those posts in national security terms, of course, is the crucial ambassadorship to the Bahamas.
One of our oldest allies.
Yeah. Key Atlantic area post.
Right.
The appointee, of course, is San Diego's own Doug Manchester. And this week, Doug Manchester faced the hot fire of the most deliberative or the most impressive deliberative body in the history of mankind, the Senate.
Yes.
One thing came up that has haunted Manchester since 2008.
Yeah.
And it was the donation that he made to Proposition 8, to support Proposition 8, the measure that banned gay marriage in California for many years, right? It's like 150,000, 125,000, I think. So Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey asked Manchester about it. And I thought his answer was pretty interesting. Here it was.
Would you like to clarify your position for the committee?
My position has been clarified many, many times. The fact that I am totally 100% for human rights in all across the board, anything that the people want to do in this country in the parameters of the wall, I encourage them to do so.
all across the board.
Within the parameters of the wall.
Now,
he clearly means Trump's wall.
Right, yeah, the wall that borders our country, right? Inside that country.
It's a wild vision for the country. Once you're inside the wall, free to go.
Dionyse it. Yeah, it's just like, now, so he probably means the walls of your house.
He presumably means within the privacy of your own home.
Right, behind
what people
doors.
commonly say. Yeah.
He's just like thinking structures.
Yeah.
And so he goes on, of course, to say, like, this was a horrible mistake.
And he really regrets it, which is good. I'm glad he said that.
Yeah.
But he also says that he encourages them to do that, which is very peculiar way to phrase an acceptance of who other people are.
It's very
like I encourage you to do that. It's like people are dying and on bated breath, waiting for his approval to sleep with this person from the same sex of them.
It's a very Trumpian sort of approach, right? It's just
it is.
It's like you just add emphasis somewhere. It's like I want you to have lots of sex.
And frame it around exactly, and frame it around you. Like
I'm the greatest person in the world for wanting you to have more.
No one encourages gay marriage as much as me. Yeah.
So it looks like he'll make it through. Congratulations
to the people of the Bahamas.
Yeah, you got Papa Bahamas. So we got a great show this week. We are going to go through the big news that was, of course, on our radar screen. I think a lot of people were anticipating the podcast after the big news this week from SANDAG. We'll get into that. We're also going to talk to Randy Record from he's the chairman of the Metropolitan Water District, and we're going to give you a little explainer about the big war between the San Diego County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District. So that's coming up in the second half of the show for those on the podcast. But my friend here, Andy Keatts, has been sucking in a paper bag for the last 3 days, hyperventilating a little bit about this report. Just came out. SANDAG, of course, San Diego Association of Governments, hired a law firm to find out who knew what and when did they know it about why the agency misled voters, right? So we're talking about Measure A. But let's lay a groundwork a little bit.
Okay.
So 2004, when I started reporting here, SANDAG puts forward and gets voters to approve at 2/3 vote Transnet, which is a 1/2-cent sales tax.
Yes.
That has been collecting money ever since then at a lower rate than they thought that it would.
Mm-hmm.
And in October, you started poking around, and what did you find?
I found first what you just said, that Transnet had been expected to raise X amount of dollars, and was in fact on pace to raise quite a bit less than that,
right?
Closer to $9 billion instead of the $14 billion promised.
And this matters because what you promise voters is what you're also able to promise them as far as projects that would make them want to support it. So trolley lines, highway improvements, all that stuff, right?
Right. And so then I also looked at the Measure A forecast and saw that it had this fundamental problem.
Measure A was the measure put on the November ballot to raise another 1/2-cent sales tax with another bevy of promises about what that money would be used to pay for. And so we were a few weeks away from that. Well, a few months when you first started looking into this.
But yeah, a couple weeks out from when I published. And that basic issue was kind of isolating some problems with that forecast, that it was expecting people to spend more than they had ever spent. Okay, so that goes through, the election happens, Measure A fails. Important to note here, Transnet's still in effect. So this fundamental issue is still facing San Diego.
Right. The projects that were promised, the money that was projected to come in is coming in far lower, which means the projects promised might not happen. Also, the costs of those projects was a lot higher than they admitted.
Right, which I found out later that their running tally of how Transnet is going includes a revenue forecast, but also an assessment of the costs. And in fact, they had spent an entire year with a formal update to all those costs that was an $8 billion increase that they didn't incorporate into the Transnet program, thereby making it appear to be on much surer footing.
So there's basically three sort of scandals here. One, they knew that Transnet was coming in at a lower rate than they projected and yet hadn't been telling people.
Yes.
Two, they knew that the projects were more expensive than what they'd been telling people, but they weren't telling people that.
Yes.
And then three, they knew that the $18 billion, the big projection of what they were telling voters they could raise from this new sales tax, was far bigger than it was ever going to actually collect.
Right. So these were all things that I had reported over a period of time. Many of them would be later conceded by SANDAG. But then this investigation got greenlit when I was able to show that there were emails and a presentation attended by SANDAG executive leadership that discussed this world of issues.
Yeah, there was, in fact, a couple emails that said, OMG, WTF, we're in, basically everything's wrong.
Yeah.
You uncover these emails, and finally SANDAG's board says, okay, we got to figure out,
what did we know? When did we know it? Did we go to voters knowingly misleading them about this revenue total?
And does this guy Andrew Keatts know what he's talking about?
Yeah.
So the report comes out. We have a very late night reading it.
Yeah.
And we have pulled out 4 excerpts from it that we found that are very interesting. But first, let me just say, Andy, I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
All of you, you were cited in there like 60 times. Everything has been vindicated. You haven't had to do a single correction on all of your reporting. Very good job.
Thank you.
All right. So in the report, there's some excerpts we wanted to highlight. The first one.
Okay, so this first one, they start off and they say, okay, we found a lot of stuff, but we should let you know that you hired us to just investigate what we knew and what was known and when was it known about Measure A and only Measure A.
So in those 3 scandals we talked about, just that last
one. And they said that there were some people who were specifically concerned with the cost issue not being disclosed. And this is a quote from it. A number of witnesses raised this issue as one of significant concern. We have not investigated the issue since it falls outside the scope of our authorized work.
All right. So the board, which is meeting on Friday,
Yeah.
it should maybe consider doing more.
Yeah, it's very interesting that this has already been a major story. It is that this investigation kind of was covered by many more people than just Voice of San Diego. The investigation starts off right away by saying there's a lot more out here that we didn't even look at.
All right. The second excerpt.
Okay, so while all this was unfolding, Ron Roberts published an op-ed in Voice of San Diego that made a number of claims about how everything was okay and what was
Roberts
known.
is the chair of the SANDAG Association Board of Directors and a county supervisor.
Yeah, so the everybody on SANDAG comes from another agency. He comes from the County Board of Supervisors. He wrote an op-ed saying essentially everything is okay. Gary Gallegos, the executive director of SANDAG, also wrote a letter to a bunch of board members, also trying to assure them that everything was okay. The investigation kind of dances around this with a bunch of euphemisms. It describes this letter and op-ed as significantly wordsmithed. It says that they were somewhat dishonest. It says they were insufficiently transparent. But in general, they included some just false statements. And this is another quote from the investigation. A number of witnesses were unhappy with SANDAG's public relations response to the Measure A forecasting error, having found it to be somewhat dishonest. In particular, we showed a number of witnesses Gallegos' letter, and most agreed that staffers had drawn a clear connection between the forecast and the Transnet plan of finance.
Right.
So these letters and op-eds you wrote, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
Even after we did all this reporting, they were telling the public things that the investigators have decided were dishonest. All right, the third excerpt. So the central question really is, did the executive director, Gary Gallegos, and some of the leadership really know what they were doing when they were misleading the public? And the report really goes out of its way to try to give them the benefit of the doubt, and it still looks really bad. But at the heart of their argument is that the former chief economist, Marnie Cox, was just really stubborn and powerful, and they couldn't go around. So some of the staff talked about how they just were afraid to talk about it because they didn't think he would let them talk about it.
Yeah.
And Gary Gallegos was really bending over backwards to accommodate this guy's
It seems very
perspective.
clear that he deferred to Marnie's opinion most of the time.
Right. So there's one part in here that's talking about how at one point they come to them and they say, look, here looks like irrefutable evidence that something's really awry here, because the projections that they were talking about, those numbers they were talking about, showed productivity growth in San Diego to be just wildly extreme, just way higher than anything you could realistically expect to happen in life.
Yeah.
Right. And so, however, this is from the report. However, this presentation did not persuade Cox, this is the former chief economist, who argued at length that the discrepancy between falling job growth and rising productivity could have been caused by the use of drones. Multiple interviewees remembered this happening, and all said it was immediately apparent that this argument was absurd. For the drones hadn't even been around because when this data was being talked about. But it's just like, this is what they're doing. He's holding on to this so tightly. He's like, anything that's...
When I read this, my hair actually caught flames. When I was just like, oh, drones? And then that follow-up sentence, a number of interviewees said it was absurd in an official investigation.
So this is just an illustration of just how powerful some people were clinging onto this. But by this time, everyone knew that they were wrong, but there was one chief economist still holding on.
Yeah, so I'll dwell very quickly in a few specifics here. So there's this crucial meeting in December of 2015.
Uh-huh.
In that meeting, it is
conclusive that they showed slides to try to make their case, the staffers who knew that there was a big problem here. And those slides drew an explicit connection between the errors that they had found and the tax revenue that was realistically going to come in versus what was expected to come in for the existing tax transnet. Now, that's conclusive. So we know for a fact that they said, this is having a big problem with our tax revenue for our existing sales tax. So that in itself is big, and a number of things were said after the fact publicly that are contradicted by that central fact. They do hang really closely on whether or not Measure A itself was discussed in this meeting. And there's some differing opinions. One staffer says that it was, and that Marnie Cox kind of lied about it and deceived them in that situation. And it's worth noting that dispute, as much time as it gets in the investigation, has already conceded that it is related to their existing tax measure. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to, for some reason, think that they were able to make that connection, but not make the next leap that another tax, just like it, was somehow different.
In other words, the whole group had realized that the old tax increase was bringing in far less revenue because of an error.
Yeah.
And it's a leap of faith to assume that they didn't think that same error
would be related
to what they were telling voters about this thing.
About Measure A, right. And then even if you set all that aside, it's also known that the now chief economist, who wasn't at the time, Ray Major, found that the dispute, whether it happened or not in that meeting, he knew for a fact it had happened. It was the case just a couple weeks later. He says so in the report. And then a few months go by, I sent them some questions, and then in October, everyone agrees except for Marnie Cox, who is able to continue to persuade Gary Gallegos that everyone else in the agency is wrong. Yeah. So good reason to believe that it was all known and discussed in December. Conclusive that the now chief economist knew in January. Conclusive that everyone else knew by October. And really, at that point, it was just Gary Gallegos taking the word of Marty Cox up until the election.
All right. And the final excerpt is really the worst.
Yes. SANDAG leadership told staffers to delete and hide documents so that they would not come up in public records requests.
So we had these three scandals I laid out before. Now we have a fourth.
Which is maybe the worst.
Really is. It's absurd.
It's absurd. So here's in late October, I started being really convinced that what I had found was significant, and I put in a major public records request for a bunch of communications and emails and things like that. On that very same day, they have a meeting with the general counsel, John Kirk, and they have a meeting with Gary Gallegos and all of these people. And this is a quote from the investigation. It is almost certain that on October 28th, 2016, SANDAG executives and or legal counsel instructed employees to delete documents. It is less certain what exactly the instruction entailed, although it is highly likely that Kirk and possibly Gallegos instructed employees to delete draft documents so they would not be included in a public records request. Okay, that's very bad.
So that's the deleting part.
That's only half of it.
There's a subsection of the fourth scandal.
At the same time, one of the staffers created a folder on a separate server that was isolated from the server that the legal team would use to search for keywords included in public records requests to find the records that were responsive to the request, meaning it was able to be essentially isolated hiding place for all the documents that they created while they were researching this problem. And so the person who created that is named Croninger, and this is what it says in the investigation. When Croninger created Hannah Tools, that's the name of this folder. When Croninger created Hannah Tools on November 1st, 2016, he admittedly did so as a way to avoid public records requests. It also seems highly likely that Kirk, this is the legal counsel, approved the use of Hannah Tools, even if he did not know what it was called, as a location to store and then mass delete draft documents created in the search for the forecasting error. And so then they go on to say that Gallegos and Kawada had approved this, and they don't know for sure if Gallegos and Quada and Kirk were all aware of maybe the most concerning element, which is that this folder was non-searchable and wasn't backed up. So they can't conclude that they knew that, but they can conclude that the whole point was to keep things from being available for public records searches.
So we are going to transition right now to our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
It's for SANDAG. I mean, we've reported a lot over the last few months, but I have to say, much of what was in this report did not shock me. I had done the reporting. I knew a lot of this. But just reading it all in once, the feeling I went to bed with Monday night is just what complete disdain they have for the public, for their constituents. It's just a complete lack of respect for the people that they're supposed to serve.
When their first reaction is to like, oh, what can we hide?
What can we hide? What can we delete? How can we delete it?
Yeah, and then these op-eds too, like that they're how did you describe it? Like
the best version of these op-eds is that they were written on a knife's edge to be true. Like the most careful wording possibly so that you could maintain some plausible deniability at the gates of heaven that in fact it wasn't purely speaking a lie, which is just so fundamentally dishonest. And like I said, it's just disdain for the public.
Yeah. So look, there's those three scandals, the issue of how much tax revenue was coming in on the old tax that exists, the issue of the costs that haven't been disclosed, the issue of the voters, how they were lied to last year or misled.
Yeah.
And now there's this one, which is huge. And we're still grappling with what does this mean for their current email and records retention policy? Yeah. What are they doing? Have they been getting rid of other documents?
Is this the first and only time they've ever behaved this way?
Yeah, what is happening?
Yeah.
And what are the board of directors going to do about this? Because this is a major agency that has a major mandate for our transportation and future growth. And what are they going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what are they going to do to restore confidence and trust in this organization?
Are there any consequences for treating the public like this?
All right, in the second half of the show, we're going to have our hero, a little extended hero of the week, and we're going to bring in Randy Record, the chairman of the Metropolitan Water District, and really understand this war, try to take some time to explain this battle between the San Diego County Water Authority and Metropolitan Water District. This has been done in partnership with our friends at News Radio 600 Kogo, and find the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. The Voice of San Diego podcast is made possible in part by the Downtown San Diego Partnership. Enjoy this short sponsored interview with Downtown Partnership member Ace Parking.
Hey, Kinsey here with a short sponsored interview brought to you by Downtown San Diego Partnership. Keith Jones is the managing principal and partner at Ace Parking, a company that's grown from a small San Diego family business into one of the nation's premier parking companies. So Keith, you take a lot of pride in being based here in San Diego.
You know, as being a fourth-generation San Diegan, third-generation business owner, I'm grateful to be part of the fabric of the community. We have over 2,300 different employees and team members that we employ within the county of San Diego, and I look at my job as being of service to both my team members and my employees and the customers that hire us and park with us. So I look at every day of how I can be a servant leader for both my organization and both the city that I get to call home.
You can hear the rest of this sponsored interview at the end of today's show. Okay, our hero of the week. All right, this hero is more of just kind of a story. So Sarah Libby did a great story this week about, which really kind of just captures the homeless crisis in one unfortunate encounter. So almost 2 years ago exactly, 2 police officers were called by complaints to Mission Bay near Bahia Hotel, right? And they're talking to one group, and then they come across another guy. And I'm just going to play from the officer's own body cam, part of the encounter that they have with this guy to kind of set the scene. Okay, so this is a guy named Tony Diaz, the homeless guy, and the police officer is challenging him.
I came here to use the bathroom, and I've only been here first. Now how long? 10 minutes?
So you say.
See, if you use that, you think I've been here all night.
I've been here longer than 10 minutes.
You think I've been here all night? That's what.
Yeah,
it is.
you've been here longer. Maybe not all night, but you got here a lot earlier.
I don't come back anywhere here till after 4 because that's the rules between and 4.
But you're always in your car, so you can always move it.
Huh?
Okay, Tony, you're hurting my head. Okay.
My what?
You're hurting my head.
You don't. How do you think it feels for me?
Well. Yeah, you obviously don't understand a lot of things. I can't explain it to you correctly.
I understand that as long as I'm not sleeping in the vehicle
between
10 and 4, then there's no problem.
There's nothing that says sleeping in vehicle. It's inhabiting your vehicle.
All right, grab onto that for a sec. There's nothing that says sleeping in your vehicle matters. Okay, so after this encounter, he gets this citation. And the guy, Tony Diaz, decides to challenge it. He goes to court. And at court, it's basically him versus the police officer. And the police officer says, while under oath, I contacted Tony in the back of his camper. On the date of the violation on the ticket, he was sleeping in the back. Superior Court Commissioner John Blair asked this police officer again, police officer Colin Goversky, again directly, when you first made contact with Mr. Diaz, he was sleeping in the back of the vehicle on the date of the violation. Is that correct? Goversky answers yes, but he wasn't.
He was
Remember?
not.
And he's even arguing to the guy, it doesn't matter if I saw you there.
Yeah.
So turns out this was all not true. He made false testimony on the stand about it.
Right. Now, so the city attorney had to vacate a conviction.
Yeah.
When was later discovered that there was body camera footage that corroborated what the defendant was saying and made a liar potentially of the. Now that you got to allow for the possibility that he misremembered in some way, but I mean, in any case, what he said on the stand was demonstrably untrue.
Right. So the what's interesting in another way too is this homeless guy challenges this infraction, and then it has to go to an appeal. And the reason it goes to an appeal is because his attorney, Colleen Cusack, wanted to challenge the law. The constitutionality of the law.
Right.
Because she just assumes this is true. He got this infraction.
Yeah.
So she has to take it all the way up. And it's during that another sort of, I don't know if he's a full hero, but he's Stephen Hansen, the city attorney, looks at this and says, I'm going to ask for the body camera footage, gets the body camera footage and discovers that this is the police officer himself said he didn't see him in the car sleeping.
Right.
Now, so the hero is kind of a combined one, goes to the guy for not just taking it and for challenging it, but also the lawyer Colleen Cusack. But also, this is really just the story of homelessness in one encounter. I mean, he goes there to use the public bathroom. You're not allowed to sleep in your car, but you can be in a public place. It's like this weird, where are you supposed to go if you're homeless?
Yeah, it's this world of issues around the fact that it is not illegal to be homeless. That is not a crime, and yet that people in the public don't want to be around homeless people, so they make complaints that the police then respond to.
Yeah.
And they use other infractions to ticket the act of being homeless, which is not itself a crime. And you can hear it in that exchange where he's just like, it's like he's already got his mind made up. He's like, look, I know you're a homeless guy. I know what's happening here, and I'm going to write this ticket, and it doesn't matter what you say.
And he's really perturbed that, like, he really does believe the infraction is living in his car. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crime happening.
Right.
And that's just, that's hard. And it's also just this vivid demonstration of, like, people not being allowed to be in desirable places.
Yeah.
If he's sleeping in National City or whatever, this isn't going to be a problem.
It certainly wouldn't have played out like this, I don't think.
And so then there's the last point that's really interesting. So this city attorney finds this, but the city attorney's office never the city attorney's office doesn't refer it to the police and say, look, this happened.
He lied on the stand, or he gave false testimony, I should say, on the stand. Yeah, and so the other issue, which, I don't have much sympathy for this officer based on the series of events that we've just lined up, but I do have sympathy for officers in general who are called in as this force that must be both law enforcement and caseworker for a group of people that has no good place to go. It's not as though there's an easy solution out there that the city has, that the city has decided to solve, that the city has created the situation, and that officers can easily manage and negotiate. That hasn't happened. So they are instead left policing the situation that's untenable.
All right. Fascinating story. Good reporting from Sarah Libby. All right, joining me in the great Voice of San Diego podcast studio is Rivard. But before I get to his brilliance, we need to talk about the Voice of San Diego and how it needs your support. If you listen to this every week, and I hear more and more people who do. I was at the barber shop, and the guy said, "Hey, you're Scott Lewis from that podcast." I was like, that. Usually they know me from like TV or something, but he just recognized the voice. I love that. It's fantastic.
What were you telling him?
I was talking about something political. They're always asking about like soccer or something. So anyway, people are out there listening. I know you care about this. You're, walking the dog. You're watering the lawn or whatever. Maybe not with too much water.
That's a great segue.
Yeah, but step up. We really need support. Every person who really values any of the services we provide. voiceofsandiego.org/donate. I would really appreciate it. We have a new addition to the staff this week. Julianne Marco is our new Chief Operating Officer. We'll have her on at some point to introduce her. She's going to be my partner in keeping this place going and thriving, and she's great, right?
She's fantastic.
All right. So please do that, voiceofsandiego.org/donate. And so Rye and I wanted to talk about an issue regarding water. So there's a long simmering sort of battle going on between the Metropolitan Water District and the San Diego County Water Authority. So let's do a quick sort of background. Each water district in San Diego County, like the city of San Diego, they're all these historical constructs of people getting together to get water, right? And they all got together and formed the County Water Authority, which buys its bulk water mostly from the Metropolitan Water District, right? And so what the local districts are to the Water Authority is to the Metropolitan Water District. This giant Los Angeles-based agency, big tower right outside the train station, pretty cool. And so the battle, though, between the Water Authority, the County Water Authority of San Diego, and the Metropolitan Water District has been going on for a while. And let me also draw this distinction. So in 2003, when I was a cub reporter in San Diego, one of my first tasks was to report on the Quantification Settlement Agreement, the QSA. And this was this big deal between the four major water districts in Southern California about water. In the highlight of it was they basically saying that the Colorado River, we were going to decide once and for all how much water that was going to bring us, and then we were going to divvy it up. And in that sort of divvying up process, San Diego made a deal with the Imperial County Irrigation District, the Imperial Irrigation District, about taking some of their water that was left over from this deal. Some of their farms would go fallow, one of my favorite words, and we would get that water. Now, we don't actually own pipes that would send us that water. And that brings us up to today, right? One of the biggest battles and legal fights we have with the Metropolitan Water District is what?
So they own the pipes. They own the Colorado River Aqueduct and then some pipes that come off of it and bring water from the Colorado River down here to San Diego. And we want to use that aqueduct and those pipes to bring water that we purchased separately from the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and get water here. But we can't. And so
You mean to get water from the Imperial Irrigation District?
yes,
Right.
to here.
Right.
And we can't do that without Metropolitan and their system, unless we want to build our own system over the mountains. We'd be building it through the Anza Borrego, basically.
Right.
And we don't.
Has that ever been discussed?
It has. Some form of a pipeline has been discussed, and it's probably somewhere on some dusty shelf. But that's not going to happen right now.
Right.
And so we've been talking to Metropolitan. We talked to Metropolitan. We said, hey, we want to get this water here. What can we work out? We couldn't work out a deal. They wanted to charge us one price. We wanted another price. Yada, yada, yada. We're still in court.
So that's called a wheeling price?
It's a wheeling rate. And the negotiating problem is Metropolitan has two sources of water, which mean that we have two sources of water because we get most of our water from them. They get water from Northern California through something called the State Water Project, which is a 600-mile-long series of canals and pipelines that bring Sierra Mountain snowmelt here, and then the Colorado River Aqueduct. And one costs more to operate than the other. The State Water Project that brings the Northern California water here costs a lot more to operate. And when we wanted to use Metropolitan's system, the Colorado River system, they wanted to charge us the combined costs of operating the system. And we said, no, we just want to pay for the cheap part of it, the Colorado River part of it. Don't try and charge us for this Northern California part.
All right, hold up for just a sec. We pay the combined rate for the most of the water we get from Metropolitan Water District.
Yeah, we do.
What they're saying is that for this deal we worked out with the farmers at Imperial Irrigation District, that water, since it's coming from the Colorado River, should just come to us for the price that the Metropolitan Water District has to do to get that water from the Colorado River.
Which is way cheaper.
Okay.
It's easier.
So that's the heart of the fight. Now, take us through how the fight's gone. When first court said, you are right, San Diego County.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You have won a big prize.
Yeah. Technically, the judgment was a couple $100 million in San Diego's favor, but since there's several cases that are going to apply for the next several decades, it was basically a $7 billion win for San Diego, and we were very excited. The Water Authority was very excited, and then of course, Metropolitan appealed.
And that appellate court ruling came back like recently,
June 21st.
Okay, and that said, nope. In fact, you've won on a bunch of points, but not that big one.
Not the big one. So we won maybe $1 billion, but we lost $6 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And the Water Authority, frankly, tried to spin it as a win. And when you lose $6 billion in a day, I don't consider that a win. And then they appealed it to the state Supreme Court, which they're hoping will hand them a win on the big chunk of change. And that's sort of where we are.
Let's draw one other angle out. So there's that legal battle, but there's also a PR battle occurring. Now, what are the ends? So that the Water Authority's sending letters, doing surveys, all kinds of things to drive up public pressure on the Metropolitan Water District for what?
There has been years, about a quarter century of back and forth. The Metropolitan was ill-prepared for a drought in the early 1990s, and San Diego felt like it got the bad end of the deal, that it was going to face too many water cutbacks, a disproportionate number of water cutbacks compared to other people in Southern California. And since then, it's gone out and tried to buy a bunch of what it considers reliable water, this new desalination plant in Carlsbad, this senior right to the Colorado River water that Imperial Irrigation District has. And as part of that package, we've sort of, both agencies have engaged in different kinds of underhandedness and hanky-panky over the decades. The latest wave is pretty fairly coming from the Water Authority. They've had...
From San Diego.
From San Diego. They have PR consultants who are waging a sort of war against Metropolitan, saying, you've been spending too much money, you're reckless, you're not good at your jobs, we should have the state come in and take you over. They paid for a poll asking people, if we tell you all these terrible things about Metropolitan, will you think it's a terrible agency? Lo and behold, people thought that. And that's sort of where we are now. There's a court battle and a PR battle.
And that PR battle played out in the Union Tribune recently with various op-eds. one of which came from Randy Record. He's the chairman of the Metropolitan Water District. Again, they have these big boards that represent different areas of Southern California, and then they hire staff underneath them. And so Randy Record made the point in the Union Tribune that this is all a big waste, that San Diego is wasting too much money on this court case, and we're never going to win enough back to justify that. So we decided to call him. Here he is. All right, we are joined on the line by Randy Record. He is the chairman of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you.
So, right, let's start. You take this away. This is your baby.
Yeah, I mean, we've, anybody who's sort of in the water world has about a weekly encounter with the feud between the San Diego County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. But, the public only sees this every now and again. In the UT, it kind of spilled out this week, and you wrote, quote, it seems the Water Authority is not leveling with its ratepayers about just how unsuccessful and needless this fighting has been. How do you figure that?
Well, there were a number of issues that were involved with the litigation. The appellate court ruled on the majority of those in favor of San Diego, and yet the one issue that was most important to Metropolitan, the court ruled in favor of Metropolitan. So we're very pleased by that. I mean, if you look at a financial analysis, the trial court had awarded San Diego a pretty good chunk of money, and about 80% of that has been reversed so that Metropolitan won't be paying. So, we're pleased that the biggest part was seen by the appellate court the way that we see it. The other issues that San Diego prevailed on, we've decided not to appeal because we think they're of less consequence at this point in time, and we're ready to move forward.
Yeah, I sense the sort of frustration, like this is all just the lawyers fighting now. The lawyers are the only ones making money on this. At one point, you sort of even suggested that there's probably going to be more money spent on lawyers than on that'll actually change hands as a result of this this case.
Right. Well, at this point, we're waiting to see if the state Supreme Court will take up the case. If it stands as is, then it looks very clear that San Diego will have spent more money litigating than what they've accomplished with judgments as far as the monetary award. So that's how I see that.
I mean, they still expect that eventually they'll get about $1 billion out of this on the smaller stuff that you guys decided not to appeal about. Do you think that's a fair a fair assessment of the value?
Well, I have a different interpretation. For example, one of the issues was preferential rights, which has to do with what your rights are as a member agency in the times of shortage. Those are less and less important because we come together as a board and we determine how we're going to handle a shortage. And so in the history of Metropolitan, the preferential rights has never been implemented. We think that there may be state law that supersedes that. I'm very confident in Met's ability to be reliable, and so I think the idea that preferential rights would ever be implemented is a very low risk, and the rest of the board sees it that way, and really don't think it's something that's worth fighting over at this point.
So there was a op-ed in the UT as well from local mayors who obviously had a different perspective and said that it was worth pursuing the litigation further. And they said that while MWD says no ratepayers win when larger water agencies spend years in courts, the reality is that under MWD's current rates, some agencies do win. In fact, all MWD's other customers benefit to San Diego's detriment when MWD adds the cost of its state water project supplies onto the cost of transporting our own independent water supplies. You have a response for that?
Sure. I mean, to me, that's sort of spinning what's going on here. You need to remember that this is not a transfer. This is an exchange. So San Diego is providing an amount of water from the Imperial Irrigation District from the Colorado River, and in exchange, they're getting an equal amount of Colorado River water and also state project water. So it's completely appropriate to have the transportation cost of the state water included. And what's actually happening here is that was an expensive transfer, and that's okay. San Diego made that decision in the name of reliability, perfectly understandable. But to try to shift the cost of moving that water to the other member agencies is inappropriate. So I think they've kind of got that backwards in the way they presented it in their op-ed.
And there's, I think, in your op-ed and some of other Metropolitan people's comments lately, there's a frustration that this has been going on for a very long time. I think San Diego probably has that same frustration. But what do you make of the regional fight as a whole? Because down in San Diego, I think a lot of people have this impression that there's a sort of big bad Los Angeles-based agency trying to screw us out of water. You're not from LA, I don't think. I think you're a farmer out in Riverside. What do you make of what San Diego's been doing to sort of the whole regional water picture?
There's been an issue between San Diego and the rest of Metropolitan for a long time, and I don't think it's directly related to LA. I'm frustrated because we keep fighting this battle in the courts, and at this point it's gotten to a level of San Diego coming out with a public relations campaign to discredit the other member agencies and some of the representatives. And I think making this personal is inappropriate. It's not a good way to spend ratepayer money. And as Metropolitan, we've decided to stick with the facts and stick with what the court says and let it play out. But it is extremely frustrating. When public agencies litigate each other, there's no way that the public wins. There has to be some way to figure this out. And I'll give you another example. The president or the chair of the Water Authority Board, Mark Muir, sent a letter to the Met Board saying, hey, let's talk. And one of our board officers, Steve Blois, from a Ventura County agency, traveled down to San Diego to address the Water Authority Board and said, I'm here, I'm ready to talk. And as I recall, nothing came of that except that at the next Met meeting when Director Blois was in LA, Mr. Muir and some of his other folks from the authority were in Ventura talking about how inappropriate the things that were being done by Mr. Blois. So to me, I'm not sure how you get beyond that kind of behavior and how you really sit down and figure out what's best for the public. How do we resolve this and move forward?
But neither side is blameless. One of the things that Met lost on was this rate structure integrity clause, this clause that was basically said if San Diego ever challenged the Metropolitan rates that San Diego is now challenging in court, Met would stop subsidizing local water supply projects. And you guys have, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars to do that, which could have made my rates, everybody listening to this, rates a little bit lower. And Met said, you sue us, we won't give you any money for the stuff you want locally. The court said that was unconstitutional. It was denying people a right to petition the government. I always thought it was kind of vindictive. I mean, there's stuff on both sides, right?
Well, it sounds vindictive when you say that it was put in place so that San Diego couldn't sue. It was any member agency. Any member agency wanted to challenge the rate structure wouldn't be eligible for local projects funds. I think that's a great program. My agency, Eastern Municipal Water District, has taken advantage of that, and we have relied more on local supplies with those investments, which means the imported water that Met has is available for other member agencies, including San Diego. So, I mean, San Diego could have signed up for the Carlsbad project and decided not to and decided to litigate. And so, but that's that's another one of those things that they prevailed on, and frankly, I'm okay with that. Let's move forward. You want to sue, you have the right to sue.
So one of the first things that comes up when somebody like you makes an argument that says, look, you're wasting too much money on this litigation, all these expensive attorneys. You're not going to come out of it with a profit or a win for ratepayers. Well, the first thing that comes as a response is, well, isn't this billions of dollars still in contention? Isn't there a chance that San Diegans, and I think San Diegans listening, would maybe hope for dramatic rate relief? Why is that not a reasonable concern to pursue?
Well, let me be clear. I didn't say that's what was going to happen. I said once the state Supreme Court decides whether or not to pick this up, then we'll have an idea of whether the investment has paid off. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm certainly not an attorney. And I agree that if someone told me that my water rates would go down if my agency prevailed on a lawsuit, I think that's great. But if you take the time to really look at what's going on, this is nothing but a shift of expenses for moving water to all the other member agencies. That's inappropriate. You go out and find yourself a water supply, you want Met to move it, then you need to pay the appropriate transportation costs, which is exactly what the appellate court has confirmed.
Well, Randy, let's. I think just to pull off that question that Rye asked was, about the long fight. What about the future? How does this fall into place? Is this just something we have to live with as Southern California sort of political and policy observers, that the Water Authority and the Met will be at war for a long time? Or how does this shake out? Is there any fundamental reforms that you guys could pursue, or that they could pursue?
That's a very good question. It's a question I ask all the time. I have engaged Mark Muir, also the gentleman before that, Mark Weston, who I knew from Aqua, and we've had good discussions, but we're unable to kind of move things forward. I'm very anxious to try to find some common ground and figure out how to do that. I have to say again that this public relations campaign is not helpful. It doesn't lead to sincere and honest dialogue.
When we're talking about some of they did a survey where they explored ideas that, the Met would be sort of perhaps taken over by the state. There was a few other things. What was the worst part of that public record or public relations campaign in you guys' mind?
Well, I think you probably hit on it. It's not much of a survey when you say, don't you think the state should take over the operations of this agency that's out of control? I talked to a number of people in San Diego who are involved with water districts, and they, without exception, say the last thing we want is the state coming in and telling us what to do. So that's difficult to understand the motive there. And again, when you start to make it personal, it really makes it hard, as I said, to sit down and have a discussion that really moves things forward. We'll try to get beyond that. I have a lot of friends in San Diego, and I'm always looking for ways to try to get the dialogue going.
Right. Randy Record, the chairman of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Now back to the conversation with Keith of Ace Parking.
You take customer service seriously. I've heard you've been known to answer client emails at 3 a.m.
I believe strongly that if you're going to be a privately run organization that you take pride in and that you live and breathe, then it's a 24/7 business. And so the type of emails or correspondence that I'm responding to are everything from a customer asking about, how do I engage with this type of parking facility in terms of making a reservation? Or I was always taught by my grandfather, and I think this was a a Navy thing that, hey, no matter, even if it's 6:30 on a Friday evening and a client calls or emails you, you need to respond that evening. It's not okay for it to wait to the next day or later, because they're trusting you. They're trusting to work with you. And so that's just another core value that I believe runs true, and I think is part of that San Diego mentality about both being a community mind base, but showing our true might of being living on the international stage.
So Keith, speaking of being community minded, what sort of social programs or issues is your company most interested in?
Well, being from San Diego and having a business of the size and scope of Ace Parking, I believe strongly that great corporations make an impact in the communities they do business in. And so one of the things that touched my family, as it's touched so many within not just the Ace Parking community, but San Diego and the global community, is cancer. And so after an experience that my family had with cancer and working through that, we at Ace Parking created an initiative that every October we actually turn our blue signs around town pink, and we call it our Park for Pink campaign. And each October we take a good portion of our parking proceeds and then partner with various community organizations to both help financially and promote their good doing through our Park for Pink campaign. So last year we connected with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, LLS of San Diego, and partnered there with both Scripps Hospital the year before. And in 2017, it looks like we're going to partner with Pedal for the Cause, Padres Pedal for the Cause.
And your office is close by. It's downtown here in San Diego, and you've always been located downtown. And obviously, parking lots are part of the urban design. So what do you think makes a vibrant, exciting downtown?
One of the reasons that Ace Parking has called downtown San Diego its corporate headquarters for almost 70 years is that we believe strongly that great cities, great counties, great communities have strong, vibrant downtowns. And in order to be part of a strong, vibrant downtown and parlay that into a strong, vibrant business, you need to have boots on the ground and be part of that and activating that downtown. And so us being downtown and integrating in with the community with which our customers are, I think gives us a strong understanding and advantage of what our customers and consumers want out of us. I believe great communities and great downtowns are activated. They find different ways to activate based upon the time of day, whether it be a Monday through Friday morning, more business ritual, to an evening time of, a consumer coming down and enjoying different experiences, or whether they be in our market, a consumer trade show and how the downtown community shows. It's evident that we have a homeless epidemic going on. And so instead of turning my blind eye and saying, well, it's time get my team members and employees into a safer environment, let's move out of downtown, I'm actually saying, how can we double down? How can we be involved in this? And how can we help a neighbor helping neighbor and be part of a solution? And so while the community and everyone's talking about affordable housing solutions, that is awesome and is needed, but the fact of the matter, if you're homeless and you're destitute, you don't even have money for affordable housing. And so how are we changing that conversation to say, how do we triage the situation so that we can get people off of the streets and into emergency shelters, so you can have both that approach as well as the approach of affordable housing? And so I believe of being a San Diego-based company and having the opportunity to be part of the community, then it's my responsibility to be part of a leader in the community and help understand and build solutions towards solving these problems together with the various factions that can have real-world impacts.
The Downtown San Diego Partnership is a leading advocate for the economic vitality and growth of downtown San Diego. The Downtown Partnership's many members are committed to creating a vital and vibrant urban center that benefits the entire San Diego region. Visit downtownsandiego.org for more information on its programs, or call 619-234-0201 to learn about the many benefits of becoming a member.
Today's show was produced by me, Scott Lewis, and Andrew Keatts. It was recorded by Adam Greenfield in the great Voice of San Diego podcast studio in downtown San Diego. And that's where we also produce Good Schools for All and Kinsey Moreland's Culture Cast. Thank you also to our partners at AM600 Kogo.
Visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcasts to learn more about the VOSD podcast network, all the other shows we produce, and the ones we love to support, including The Kept Faith. See you next week. If you like the podcast, please make a tax-deductible donation. voiceofsandiego.org/donate.